here we are with our in-person lab. And so what we're gonna go through is the overall idea of what we do every lab, right? So at the beginning, we're supposed to have those 3x5 cards with your health information, right? That lets us know who you came into contact, for contact tracing, that kind of thing. Remember that it is voluntary. Again, we're not trying to chase you and figure out who you are, we're trying to protect everybody else. And so that's the 3x5 card. We usually do a temperature check at the beginning, so we have that little tiny little gun just to make sure, especially during hot days like the summer, and that's about it. Then we want to make sure you're geared up and you're disinfecting your benches. I'll walk you through that. We're going to do the checkout, the burner, the plate pouring, and then we're going to complete the scope for today. And then hopefully, if we have enough time, we'll complete part 2 of the plate pouring. Now, the way I usually run these labs is kind of entertaining, I think, is that since we are only as fast as the slowest person in the lab, right, we can't move on until everybody's done. And so the way I turn it in is not necessarily a competition, but I like to make sure that I know that everybody's good to go rather than me just kind of twiddling my thumbs. And so the idea is I use your hands as my signal. And so once we finish a task that I have for you guys, all I want you to do is just raise your hand. That way I know you're done and good to go. Once I see all the hands in the room are done, then we move on to the next step. Now I do appreciate the fact that you're not going to do this, right? This is called a T-Rex hand, right? This doesn't work. I need you to make sure you have your hand all the way up so that I can smell your armpit. That's the idea, right? So if the person 10 feet away from you can smell you, you're doing a good job. So again, until all of us are doing this, we can move on. Now, first step, like I said, our information of our health. We do our temp check, and then make sure you all found your positions, which you've already done. Well done. So depending on which session you're in, you might be the top row, second row, third row, or fourth row. So depending on each lab, you'll find those. Then we want to gear up. So that means you want to put on all your PPE, which includes your masks. Those are still mandatory for us on campus, regardless of the state. Your coat, your gloves, and your goggles. Those are the key ones for right now. So you want to get them geared up. And then normally our lab technician will always walk in and double check that you're not wearing open-toed shoes or your hair is down, that kind of thing. We're going to have some fun demos on that, right? And then the next thing you want to do and get yourself trained for this, just get yourself in the habit, is trust no one. This is one of those infamous statements that I make all the time. You don't know who was here before you, right? And so that means you don't know what they did. You don't know if they licked the bench or something like that and they put Ebola on you ready, right? So the idea is get yourself used to finding your little bottle of Sanisol. It's this off blue kind of solution. It should be somewhere in the center of your bench, and spray that area that you have around you and let it sit for a small moment, and then grab a paper towel and wipe it down. Don't just hit it and wipe, because then it doesn't really work. Okay, you need to let it sit there for a little bit. So get yourself in the habit of doing that when you come in and when you leave. So disinfect before you do anything, disinfect after you do everything. So let's start off with that really quick. So find that area where you are, find that little Sanisol substance, spray that area, just kind of the area, that fourth of area that you occupy in your spot, right? Get yourself a paper towel, let it sit there for a little bit. Grab a paper towel, you only need, like an 8.5 by 11 kind of size. Wipe it down, and then you can take that piece of paper and put it in regular trash, okay? Let it sit there just a little bit, so enough to kick in, and then you can put it away. All right, so here we are. First step, you're gonna see this kind of flashing. All the steps that we have will always be on the screen. So that'll give you an idea of the timing, as well as where you should be. So if you feel a little bit lost every now and then, look up to the screen, you'll know what you're supposed to be doing, okay? Once you're done, there are a couple of trash bins in front of us. There's a couple of them in the back. Do not throw them into your biohazard, just a regular trash can, okay? So the trash cans are usually bigger, fatter. The biohazards, there might be some over here up front. Biohazards will always be red. Okay, just be aware of that. Okay, so good job. Now, we want to make sure we have our stuff in our drawers set to go. So you already confirmed your seat. You already know where your drawer is, depending on which row. And now you want to open up the first page of your lab manual. And it's going to be a sheet that looks almost like this guy. Mine's been a little bit modified, in which you have a check-in and a check-out list. And so you want to go through your drawer, just like we watched in the video, and ensure that all the items that are in your drawer are there. And you're going to just initial it so you can turn this sheet to me till the end of the semester. Okay? So ensure that all these items listed here are in there. Just the top, not the bottom. The bottom is your stuff. Okay, now from the top, let me give you a quick heads up. During remote times or during hybrid times, that kind of thing, some of these items may be shared. So for example, the test tube rack is already probably in front of you already there. Okay, so it's just sitting on top. The cans, like the soup can and the coffee can, are probably up there already sitting in front of you too, so it's not in your drawer. This also applies to the wire mesh and the tripod, which we'll demonstrate a little bit later. So those will be there. So don't worry about them too much. They're already up there, nothing to be concerned about. Okay, the other items, then look for them. Now, let me give you a couple of heads up. This is on what things look like. So you all probably will look for a little beaker that might be made out of plastic or glass. That'll contain your oil immersion in there. Okay, you're probably going to want to find a very dirty, raggedy looking little notebook that is your babyless paper. That's meant to look like that way. It actually works better that way. The other time you're going to look for something that looks like a little strip of paper, a little box of paper, which is your lens cleaner, right? So that one, make sure that you only handle it with gloves because the oil on your fingers will kind of contaminate it, right? You should have your little test tube brush, for example. And probably one of the more important ones of today, which I have hanging out over here, is going to be a wire test tube holder. So we're going to train you how to use these guys expertly for a little bit later. So you need to make sure you have that guy hanging in there, right? So you should have 2 inoculating loops and needles in there, right? 1 of each. And then everything else should be set to go. Now, you should have a little slide box. Mine will definitely look different than yours. These plastic boxes will come in all sorts of cool colors. Blue, red, white, green, all the fancy colors. They might be a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller. So they should be empty. If they have some glass in there, dispose them in a glass disposal. This is where we're going to transport all our slides today. And if you happen to bring the stuff that you did at home, you can even store them in there for later. Okay? We're going to use them next week, so we don't need them quite yet, but you can store them in there. Okay? So if in the event that you're missing something, then let me know. Now, to again ensure the safety of everybody else, this is where the 3x5 cards come into play. Rather than all of us screaming at the same time and sharing more cooties, 3x5 cards let us know, I'm missing these 3 things, and I can replace them for you. Okay? So whatever it is that you might be missing from our list, let me know, and I'll provide it for you. If not, under the check out column, even if you made a mistake, you can erase it, initial those. Because you're checking them out right now, so you can use them. And at the end of the semester, you're going to check them back in. All right, it's a little weird of the language. All right? So, missing stuff, let me know. Otherwise, once you're done with the checkout, raise your hand. That way I know I can proceed. Now, what you're going to do is once you're done going through the list, rip it out of your lab manual. So sign it, print it. You're going to put it up here in this little bin that I have over here. So we have proof that you have everything there. At the end of the semester, I will give you a give it back to make sure that everything's in there. So now that we have our turn-in pieces of first pages, letting us know that you have all the stuff that you're in there, you let me know if you're missing anything, then you'll be able to store your stuff in there, again, for the duration of the semester, which includes your Sharpie, your lighter, your gloves, your lab coat, and everything else. The only things you don't want to usually leave here are your manual, because you still want to use them at home, and your notebook, and likely things like colors. Sometimes the colors, because we're still doodling at home, we're not really going to need them here, okay? So part 1 was to make sure that when you get here, you unlock your drawers. Now, during these times, we have them unlocked and we'll lock them for you. But during other times, you'll find these cool little keys available for you for your bench, for your specific one, that you'll want to lock for yourselves up front, okay? So now that we've done our checkout, we've done everything else, then we'll proceed with our first official lab of the day, which is the Bunsen. Remember, you already had a video for this, I already played around, but there's a couple of things that we want to do. Again, back to the same rule that I'll use a lot of the times, trust no one. And this is always a fun one. This is what I love doing about this, is because since you don't know who finished, they've left in a rush, they weren't paying attention, one of the most common things is catching fire. Not saying that it happens, but it might happen. And the idea is trust no one. And so the first thing you should do after you disinfect your stuff is always check your gas valve. So in front of you, you'll see there's a valve that has this blue little cap, might say gas, might say not, but it's a blue cap. Always just get into the habit of just kind of going, it's closed, right? You don't have to go all crazy, you don't have to go all Herculean and hulkish on it. Just make sure it's nice and tight and good to go. That's gonna be part 1. right? The second thing is we always want to double check the tubing, the pipe, the tie-on tubing that it comes with can get damaged. And so you want to make sure that it's intact, that it's whole, that there's no cuts, there's no slices, there's no breaks, and there's no bends, no kinks, no nothing. Because if any of you have ever had this experience, personally one of my favorites is if you ever had a child hold a hose at home, just squeeze it and wait for somebody to just walk in front of the actual opening and get hit by water. Think of that, but fireballish, right? So you don't want to have any bends or anything like that on these guys, right? And so always inspect that the tubing is nice and intact and whole, right? You can do just quick cursory inspection should do the trick. Now with that being said, then we want to go through the anatomy, which I'll go through in a moment, and then we're going to play with all three stages of the flame. Okay, so hang in there for that. So again, let me demo, then you can follow it. So check, obviously make sure that the spigot is closed, so the valve for the gas is closed, and then let's go through a breakdown of the anatomy really quick. Whoops, went too far. So for the anatomy, I have a loose one over here so I can mess with, since my projector is not working over here. You have your barrel. Right below, at the base of the barrel connected to it, is the oxygen intake. All right, I know air is going in it, but in reality we're measuring oxygen. And that guy will turn clockwise and counterclockwise to actually make sure you're getting the right amount of oxygen. That guy should always be closed at the beginning and should always be closed at the end. So meaning that you should be able to tighten it clockwise until it can't go any further. Okay, that's how it starts, that's how it ends. Now, in the event that you look at your Bunsen burner on the bottom side, you'll also find another little valve. Really, we don't mess with that guy, but if it's there, that one is of gas intake as well. And that will control usually the height of the flame, how much gas is going in there too. Again, we don't usually mess with that one unless something's going wrong. Just be aware of that. That's all we need to know about the Bunsen burner right now until we start messing with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of demos that we've already done in the videos. But I want you to be trained on what this is going to look like. So I'm actually going to move the screen really quick over here so it makes more sense and I don't make a lot of noise, because I'm going to set stuff on fire. And I like it. All right? So check the valve, check the tube, and then the next thing is check your awesome ability to turn this on without failing. Why do I say this? Is because every semester everybody thinks that they're an adult until they realize they don't know how to use a lighter. And they go on, and it doesn't come on. And they're like, yeah, you suck at this. So make sure you can get it on in the first shot. Why do I say this? Is because if you're doing this all the time, you'll have gas accumulating, and you're gonna have an awesome fireball. It's my favorite thing to do in the lab. I'm gonna show it to you too. And so the idea is get yourself used to controlling your guy so that it's reliable. Not get a new one, right? So here's what we're gonna do. I'm actually gonna turn off all the lights on purpose so you can see what this flame looks like. I'm actually gonna hold it in front of you so it can demo it and then it can be recorded a little bit better. But in reality, you should leave it where it is, okay? So let me kill the lights really quick. And the first test we're gonna do is sound. You'll all be able to hear what gas sounds like. It's not anything fancy, right? So let me get this guy going, and just for a second. You can hear it. Gas is flowing. We leave it flowing, fireball, right? So make sure that the little oxygen intake is nice and closed so we can get the coldest or coolest of the flames. And then we're gonna practice this guy so we can get in the first shot. So we're gonna be playing with our little wand lighters. And because there's gas flowing out from this, if you try and bring the flame and put it on top, it'll just blow it out. Just like a flow of air, but it's a boatload of gas. So the trick is, rather than coming from the top, it's going to come from an angle or from the side and then light it up. Okay, so it's going to go perpendicular to this guy. All right, so I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to show you kind of what you shouldn't be doing, obviously, and then you'll get to practice it. I'll let you guys do it and then play with it. So, gas. This guy should be on already, but I don't have two hands. Fun, right? The longer you leave that open, the bigger the kaboom is going to be. Now, the idea, though, is, don't try this at home, kids, is that this flame is not very useful for us because it's cold. I know what you're going to say. I want you to understand what I'm going to do is not something that anybody should practice in general. But this is not a flame we use in microbiology because it doesn't burn. Yes, it does burn. There's enough moisture in our hands and things like that, but it doesn't do anything. So please don't do this. What we're gonna want to do is open the barrel by turning it, in this case, counterclockwise, until we get a blue flame. That's a much hotter flame. It's about twice as hot as the orange one. And this is the one we're gonna use for the cans to boil our water and things like that. Eventually, we're gonna go through the third stage where we're gonna continue to open this. And I want you to also listen. You're gonna be able to hear once it turns into the ultimate one. I'm gonna open this quite a bit. Kind of sounds like a cool little jet stream. You're gonna see two cones now. An outer warm one and an inner one. And that inner one is the most important one to us and the most dangerous one of them all. It'll literally just melt off your face. Okay? So you shouldn't be doing this like I'm doing. But the idea is we're gonna use our inoculant just like we used at home, but now metal. And I want you just to see the difference between 1,000 to 3,000 degrees. If I put this on top, you'll notice that, you know, the little metal passing through the outer cone, not a lot of fun, right? Watch the inner cone, the tip of the inner cone, just watch. See the difference? Instantaneously. You can see even the color of the metal. If I leave it there, it will melt all of this off. Okay, so it's designed so you pass it through the tip of the inner cone, right? A couple of times, and this is nice and sterile now. So that's the level we want to achieve. So we're going to practice it in here. We're going to go from orange to blue to dual cone, and then back. And so all we need to do is just close it, back to blue, close it some more, back to orange, singe off my face, right? And then with the valve, close it off. Okay, so we're gonna run through all three of them so we can actually test out our skin. Right after that, we'll set up our pouring of the plate by creating the blue flame so we can boil our samples. Okay, so that's the plan. So we get to play Harry Potter really quick by testing out if our clickers work, right? So get yourselves now again, this idea that, can you do in the first shot like I failed to do, right? So there we go. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, all right? All right, so now we're going to attempt to prepare our very first TSA plate that we can get to take home and lick it if you want to, right? But now we want to make sure we know how to set up our tripod, our gauze, and the actual Bunsen burner itself. First things, don't do this again. Just like the scope we're going to learn a little bit later, these guys need to be lifted. So that means that wherever you place it, don't drag it, because you're going to hear this. That will make me angry. But two, is they're actually removing some of the coating off your bench, the protective coating. So anytime you want to move this, always lift these guys. Now everybody's going to have a wire gauze, again, part of the common stuff. Some of them may have any holes for the geniuses that forgot to turn their flame and burnt a hole through it. Or they used the dual cone instead of a blue flame. So it happens. Now don't worry, it's fine, it's not going to break down. But let that be a kind of a learning lesson. So what we're going to do is, mine already has water. These are supposed to be empty. You're actually going to place your coffee can, that's the big one, the soup can is usually the small one, right? And if you need to adjust it, again, don't drag, lift it to wherever you need it to be to adjust it. Now, obviously, if this is already on, don't touch it. Let it cool down before you move it, right? I know I need to say these things sometimes. I don't want to be sued like McDonald's kind of thing, right? So you're going to fill it up with about 2/3 water. And so in a second, everybody's going to come and get their wire rack that you should have in front of you. And you're going to come and collect one of these guys. This is a tall. Now the reason why they're called talls is because they're usually a little bit bigger, about 50% bigger than an average tube. You're going to put it in your rack and take it back to your bench. You always want to transport these for safety, right? Especially because they're going to be hot, they're going to be wet, bad ideas. So take it back to your bench, and then you're going to place it inside your can, and that's when you want to measure the water. Because you want to make sure that the water covers the medium. And this is one of the most common concerns, is if the water goes below the medium, not the whole thing will not melt correctly. So you want to make sure that the water is right above the level of the medium. Not the tube, but the medium itself, the little off yellow portion. So you're going to place this inside here. We're going to set the tripod on to get the fire to about a blue flame, not dual cone, blue. And we're going to let it sit there to melt while we perform our next lap. Okay? Now, because this is a tube, two things. It has a cap on, which means that if you boil this, boom, loosen the cap. So all you need to do is about half a turn. So you're doing this, and that's it. It won't fall off, trust me, it's gonna go. Not completely loosening it off, just a half a turn, quarter of a turn, should be enough. Place it inside your can. You'll find out that, let me show it to you from the side. Using the second one, it'll end up tilted because it's not gonna stand up straight. So once it's tilted with the loose cap on, then fill up the water to cover this level, okay? Then, once you have that done, put your Bunsen burner where you need it to be, and between orange to bluish flame, make sure that the flame is touching the bottom without engulfing the entire can. So that means too much flame, kill off the valve a little bit, it should be fine. And let it run. Now, make sure you find a place that you're comfortable with, specifically away from your scope. Because if you're going to be working on other stuff. Excuse me. So find a happy spot, don't drag, lift. And then the other thing I'm going to give you a quick warning, this is my most entertaining part, is unless you're being told about this, is that I come from a very privileged place. It's called height. And so some of you may be vertically challenged, and so that means you might not be able to see this directly. And so that's a problem. I don't want students that start like jumping over their benches or stepping over stools and accidentally causing destruction and spilling water, etc. So place this guy close enough that you can actually observe it without ever having to do this over a boiling can of water. All right? So make sure that it's placed correctly. If you're, again, a little bit taller, so you can put it a little bit further away, that's fine, so you can see it. If you're a little bit on the, again, vertically challenged side, I don't have any better term for it, is then bring it a little bit closer. Just be careful. You don't want to spill off, be knocked off, and harm somebody, okay? So you should be able to inspect it, but never do this. Again, people, bad idea, all right? So let's set off our cans, make sure we collect our tubes, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, so we set up our tripod, we set up our Bunsen burner between that orange to blue flame, so we can start boiling slowly. So again, we covered it enough, we made sure that the cap was loose, right? And then eventually, once you do part 2 of this, when we actually pour the plate, we'll train you how to use the test tube holder, which is also a good skill to know, all right? And so we're gonna let this guy go until we finish with the scope for the moment. So everything we've done so far is basically the setup for the plate pouring. So we did our water, we did our boiling, we're gonna let it sit there for a little bit, okay? So that's the plan. So now, for the rest of the time we have, we're gonna actually use the scope, and the idea is we're gonna kind of show you what it consists of, we're gonna show you how to transport it, we're gonna go do a quick inspection, we're gonna disinfect it as well, to make sure that it maintains it clean. We're gonna clean the lenses after that, and then we're gonna train you through all 3 steps of the use. And then after that, we go in reverse, and we're done. That's it, okay? So, first of all, let's emphasize the best joke that I'm gonna tell you today, which means I'm gonna get sued by somebody, all right? These are custom scopes, and even though our cool little Olympus scopes here, usually most of these you can buy from a couple of grand, $2 to $3 grand, specifically have been designed to be customized so that the lenses that we have do it to about 15 grand. And then each of the objectives that we have here will go between $500 to about $2,000. So unless you're planning on buying me a new car, I encourage you to take care of these really, really well. Now, there's a way to transport them. You'll notice that there's a little divot in the back so you can put your main hand, and there's going to be a divot in the front so you can put your other hand, so you can always carry this with 2 hands, right? Now, the key thing is, again, it just so happens that your scopes are on your benches, so you don't have to transport them, but when they're in the cabinets, you'll have to take them out and put them back in the same way. So the joke goes, if you've ever had a child, they've always told you not to drop the child. You know, bad for the baby. My choice to you is, if you have the choice between a child and a scope, drop the baby first, not the scope. The scope is more expensive right now. Maybe it's more expensive later. Okay, so the other thing is that you're going to want to adjust it where you sit. Some of you will like to have the scope standing, some of you will like to sit. No big deal there. but you're gonna want to find a happy spot for it. Once you do not drag it. It has rubberized bases that if you try and yank it, it'll rattle the whole mechanism, and guess what? You owe me a new car or possibly a new baby. So either way of those, always lift it. Doesn't matter how many times you lift it, enjoy it. Find your happy spot 10 times if you want to, but always lift and always with 2 hands, okay? Now, we want to do also is before we do whatever we're gonna do, specifically inspect it. Again, trust no one. We don't know who was the person that used it before you, and you're gonna get the blame if you damage it now. So then the idea is we're gonna inspect it based on the lab manual, the lab supplement, top to bottom, before we touch anything about it, right? And in the event that something goes wrong, one of the things you're gonna find out, that we have these cool little sheets that are report sheets. If you find something wrong before you use it, fill this bad boy out, keep a copy and bring me 1 copy. That way we know who to blame. That way you don't get charged for whatever damage occurred to this guy. Okay? So these are our little tattle sheets, if you will, to let everybody know that you didn't hurt it, somebody else did. Okay? So let's go through this kind of a quick top to bottom thing before you do anything else with it. So let me demo, then follow basically. But the idea is you do a quick top to bottom inspection. Let me move this guy around. You always look at the oculars. The oculars should always be put in a closed position so they look like a little inverted V. And so these guys adjust a lot, but you're gonna want them to be closed. Again, let them be so that you can find out who didn't do them right. Then you're gonna proceed down a little bit more to where the little rubberized revolving nose piece is, the thing that looks like a little black ridge, right? And that's the way you move your objectives, never touching the objectives themselves. You touch the objectives, you're gonna break them. So only use that little rubberized nose piece there. And it should be at the lowest objective. It should be at the 4X, the one that has a little red band around it. It's the short and stubby one. That's the one where it should be, always. That's where you begin, that's where you end. That's where you transition for every experiment. You always go back to the red one, okay? So it should be there. Again, don't touch the objectives because they'll snap off or misadjust. And again, you owe me a new car, right? And then the stage. The stage itself should always be in its lowest state, and it should be all the way touching the arm. Now, 2 things. Again, let me do it first, and then you can follow. You can check that it's all the way to the bottom. I'm using the coarse adjuster, and you should be able to go lower. Now, here's the thing is, if it's not, again, write it down. But if it's anything higher, and you rotate any of these guys, you break them. This is why it should always be defaulted down to the bottom, okay? Now the stage hitting the back of the arm or the front of the arm itself kind of is a little optional. And the only reason why I say that is sometimes the scopes get a little old and a little bit kind of loose, and so it might slide a little bit. So it doesn't need to be perfect, but it should be pushed away against the arm itself. And then on the right side of the scope, you'll see on the top, the switch that should be set to off. There's a little circle and there's a little line. The circle meaning off in this case, and the little line meaning on. And then you'll have the little knobbish thing on there on the right side, which is the dimmer. The dimmer should be set down to the 1 or the lowest point that it can be by turning it counterclockwise in this case. So double check that all of those things are that way. And if they are good, we'll be able to go for it. We'll disinfect it. If it's not, this is when we want to go to the little tattle sheet. Let me know so we can make sure we report it to whomever was teaching beforehand. So that's the plan for right now. Let's do it. There we go. So we did the anatomy, we did the inspection. You should have disinfected these with the cool little chamois to make sure that it's nice and clean. Again, always before, always after. And then we're going to use our lens paper, depending if it comes in our cool little large versions of them or the little small strips. Making sure that, again, you're cleaning both of the oculars and the 4 objectives gently but thoroughly to make sure that there's no oil, and making sure you can see clearly through them. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use our, there we go, looking for mine, our little boxes. Again, they change in colors, shapes, and sizes, so don't let it influence you. And we're going to collect the size we're going to use. Normally we collect these one at a time. So you come over to the front, pick out each one of them, put them in your box, transport them back. 2 reasons. 1, for safety. You don't want to cut somebody even with a little slide, and they're less likely to break. If you want to store your other used slides that you've done before, you can toss them in there too, okay? But when you pick this up, make sure that you come and pick up one little sheet of Kim wipe. You don't need many, you just need one to be able to use these. Because again, these are designed to polish things. They're not meant to clean, they'll scratch things. So when you're using your slides, these will be very handy to kind of remove any extra oil or any stains or fingerprints off of them. Once you're done with these, you can throw them away, you can get more if you need it, but you don't want to have them laying around because you don't want to accidentally use it on an ocular and damage the lens itself. Okay, so that's going to be the plan. So the next thing we're going to do is that I'm going to walk you through it first on the scope, and then you'll do the follow the leader type of thing. So let me walk through the care, the disinfection, all the steps really fast. We'll stop and go, and then we'll accomplish everything. So that's the plan for now. All right. So let's demo it first to make sure you can set it up. And so the first thing we did is obviously we want to make sure we disinfected it before and after. That was the main thing to do, right? Then we position it to a place where you're going to be comfortable, close enough whether you're standing or sitting, right? And then we did the inspection from top to bottom, making sure again oculars, stage, objectives, and everything else on is done, right? And then now we want to make sure we have the correct use behind it, so we're going to demo it. And so the first slide that we're going to use after we picked up our little slide in our slide boxes is the triple strings example. And so this is the one that allows us to figure out the parfocality level. And so the idea here is we want to turn this bad boy on, and the most common thing that happens is locating where things are. And so we're going to want to take our little plug, and our plugs are actually directly in front of us behind the benches. So it's going to take us a moment to go find them. So once you unwind this, it's going to be directly in front of you behind it. So you might need to walk around or reach really weirdly. So hang in there. Now, once you do that, you're going to want to turn on the switch from that little circle to that little line, so that you turn on the scope. And then you're going to want to turn your dimmer from that 1 to about a 3 or so. That should give you a decent amount of illumination without staring too much into the oculars and giving you a headache. A lot of light focused into your eyes directly on will give you a decent headache, so be careful with that. And so once you have that up and sent to your slide, then we'll start observing stuff. Now, quick warning, because this is a wet lab typically, all our light switches are surge protected, which means that if water hits them, they snap off. So in the event that you turn this on and nothing's working, you just have to put the little reset button on the surge switch, okay? So that's it. So let's set these up really quick. Grab your cord, go find it in front of you, should be fairly close, plug it in, dimmer to 3, switch to on, center your slide, and then now we're actually going to use our very first slide, which is our triple strings one, and we're going to demonstrate the concept of parfocality, okay? So, what are we doing in parfocality? Well, we're going to do the same protocol that we use always. We clean our slides, we get set correctly with the stage clip, and the idea is we want to make sure we learn how to focus efficiently. And so right now we want to be able to find it based on your training. That means you've had great training in your previous classes and know exactly how to use the scope perfectly, right? Well done. So now we're going to raise our stages with the coarse knob adjuster, the fat, chunky adjusters that we have over here, until we're able to observe our first image. Now from that point on, is that we will not touch the coarse adjuster anymore, only the fine one, the little thin one, the little nubbin that's sticking out, that's the fine adjuster. Why? Because if we use the coarse adjuster any further, we'll raise it and we'll crack the slide and scratch the lenses because they get really close. So only under the 4x objective that we have set up right now, we'll set it up and look for the triple string slide. From there, we'll now step from the red to the yellow objective, which will be our 10x, or our 100 total magnification. Take a picture from that state, then move on from the yellow to the blue one, which is going to be from the 10x to the 40x objective, or 400 total magnification. Take another picture there too, and then that's it. We'll go back in reverse and we'll be done with this slide. Now, a couple of warnings behind this though. One is we want to teach you what practicality is. This idea that once you already have it nice and focused, all the other steps are usually focused as well. Not perfectly, but decently. So that means you need very little adjustment using the fine adjuster only. Again, never the coarse adjuster, just the fine one. Now, in order for this trick to work, in order for practicality to do its job, you need to do two things. Make sure your slide is always centered, and before you go on to the next step, that it's as sharp as you can get the pretty picture from it. So make sure you turn your fine adjuster until you get a perfect, nice and crisp look, and make sure it's nice and centered in your field of view. Then go up to the next step. So now, we're gonna practice these. That's what we're gonna do for the next couple of minutes. However, quick heads up, if you're wearing glasses, remind you that no matter how blind you think you are, because I am very blind too, is that the scope is magnifying things thousands of times. You don't need glasses, okay? So you don't need glasses to observe through these. You don't even need your contacts. This will do the job. So our first trial is going to be our triple strings, and we're going to look for the first level. So you should place your slides under the stage clip, raise your stage until you find your first image of the triple strings, okay? And then your first practice of using your phone to take a picture of it. All right, so let's start with that first. Okay, so we centered it, we sharpened it, we have our three strings, we're taking a picture. So again, the picture or it didn't happen kind of idea, right? And we now need to decide which of the three strings, the yellow, the blue one, or the red one, possibly a green depending on the slide, which one is on top. Based on that, we assign your points. Now, to make sure we are trusting our instincts, let's now move from this stage to the next one. So let me demo, and then you follow, is that we're only going to use our revolving nose piece, the little ridged black rim of rubber that we have over here. Don't touch the objectives. And we're gonna move from the red one, the 4X, to the yellow one, the 10X, okay? And so you'll see it snap in place. Again, don't touch the objectives, only the revolving nose piece. And you should be able to get a closer view of those three strings. Two things are gonna happen. You're probably gonna need to add a little bit more light because it's starting to get darker as you're zooming in. And you may need to recenter it. So use your X, Y, and adjusters, your stage adjusters, to center the image. And again, take a pretty picture, show me, or it didn't happen. All right, and then we're gonna decide one more time which string is on top, which string is on the bottom. Okay, so we've gone from the red to the yellow, so from the 4X to the 10X, right? We're gonna go one more time. Again, make sure it's centered, make sure that it's nice and sharp before we go from our 10X to our 40X. Okay, so we went through our triple strings. We decided which one is on top, bottom, and middle, all the way up to the blue. Now we're gonna go in reverse to put things away. So that means go from the blue back to the yellow, from the yellow back to the red, which is where you reset, and then you're gonna bring your stage down, and then you can take out your slide. So let's do that first. Let's get rid of our first slide since we're done with the practicality test, right? And now we're gonna place our next slide, which is gonna be our letter E. So do the same idea or same concept. Grab the next slide, nice and clean with your Kim wipe, place it securely in the stage clip, and then you're gonna look for it at the 4X. And then again, you're gonna take a quick picture to show me, so picture where it didn't happen, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now, do me a favor, again, as usual, raise your hand so I know that we're moving on from the first step to the next step. But once you make it to your letter E and you get the first picture, we're gonna start, or complete, sorry, our plate pouring portion, okay? So I wanna see hands once you found your letter E, and then we're gonna move on to the next step. So get your second slide, raise it all the way up so you can find letter E, good to go. And once we're there, leave it alone for a second. Let's all go grab our test tube racks, right? We're all going to grab our wire test tube holders. And again, as a reminder, this is a reverse grip system, which means in order to hold it, you need to let it go, right? So we're gonna again, grab the tube, let go of the actual wire test tube holder, and only grabbing it from the little edge, transfer it to your test tube rack. Again, make sure you keep them close. That way, there's no accidental slippage or burning or anything like that. Once you find that, find your happy spot where you can place your plate, and we're gonna pour it in one fell swoop into the actual slide. Once you pour it, okay, again, make sure that you're doing this clamshell technique, not opening it up so it can get contaminated. Do it comfortably but gently. You don't have to be afraid. Your hands, you don't have to shake. Just one fell swoop in there. Nice, even. Now, what's gonna happen is because it's fairly thick, it's not gonna cover the whole plate. So you're gonna have to rock the plate a little bit, gently. And what I mean by gently, your plate might move, let me show it to you perpendicularly, like a little bit like this. That's it. So you're gonna want to rock it back and forth, and a little bit of side to side. That will even out the liquid. And then that's where the plate stays. You will not touch it any further, okay? So transfer, pour, let it be. And make sure, again, that you turn off your flame, allow your water coffee can to cool so we can pour the water away a little bit later, and we're done pouring our plates. Then we'll continue on with our letter E for the moment. So far we went through 4x, 10x, and 40x, so the 40, 100, and 400 total magnifications. And now we're gonna go in reverse so that we can take out the slide on the 4x. That's always the rule. Bring it down to the 4, bring it down to the red, and then take your slide out and clean it off. Okay, that's part of the plan. And now you've been trained on how to do that in 2 seconds. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the next one, which is gonna be our last step for today, and we're done. So we're going to grab our third slide, which is gonna be our bacterial smear, and now we're gonna look for our 4x first. So that's where we're gonna spend our first time. Look for it and take an image of it so you can show me, or again, pictures or it didn't happen. So take out your letter E, replace it with your bacterial smear, find at 4x, take an image, and then we'll go through all the 3 steps as we go. So you've done the 4x, you went from red to yellow, you did the 10x or 100 total magnification, you went to 400 total magnification, and this is where we normally stop. The reason behind this is because the oil immersion takes a little bit of extra finesse. And we're gonna be doing this for all our stains. It's important that we learn it well the very first time. So again, let's look at it first as a demo, then you can practice it, then we'll go in reverse and we'll be done. So, you already made it to blue. I'm gonna keep my stage down so I make sure that I don't break anything. But you already saw that when you're at the blue objective, the 40x 400 total magnification, it's really close to the slide. If you move any further, you will break the slide and you'll scratch the next objective. So the trick is lubrication. We use oil, right? And so how we do this is actually kind of fun. We're gonna move between the blue one and the next objectives, the one that has a white and black rim, and you're gonna do this. You're gonna turn it halfway such that you can create both of your objectives are in this inverted V format, right? So the blue objective is hanging out to your left, the white and black objective is hanging out to your right. And so that'll create this little pocket, this little triangle, this inverted V, in which you can apply 1 drop of oil. And I say this repeatedly, 1 drop. The more drops of oil, the blurrier it gets, and 2, the more you have to clean. You just need 1 drop. You just need it to lubricate, and it adds to refraction. That cool thing we learned in lecture about bending light, the oil helps you do that too. So what you're gonna do is do the inverted V, take your little rod dropper, I'm gonna remove all that, just 1 little tap, bam, of 1 little drop of oil onto your slide, and then you'll allow this guy to kind of glide in. So it's gonna go from halfway. Now that there's oil onto it, it will literally hit the slide, but now smoothly glide into it. And now with little to no adjustment because of practicality, find the final image, take a picture, and show it to me. That's all we're doing. However, let's make sure we know how to take it back down so we can close off. Once you're done, picture, or it didn't happen, you're gonna go in reverse. You're literally gonna go back to the inverted V, okay? And then take the slide out, because it has oil in it. And if you turn back to the other lenses, it'll start contaminating everything in a little daisy chain. So go back to the inverted V, take the slide out, and then you can start bringing that down your stage and reversing back everything without contamination. Once we're done with that, clean our scopes, clean our lenses, disinfect everything, back up, and we're done. Okay? So that gets that started and finish off for today.